For 623 years, the Ottoman Empire stood as one of the most powerful political entities on earth. At its peak, it controlled territory across 3 continents, governed over 30 million people, and commanded armies that made European kings tremble. Then, in the span of a single century, it collapsed entirely. The speed and totality of that collapse is what makes this story so extraordinary and so worth understanding. Welcome to War History. In this video, we are going to walk through exactly how one of history's greatest empires disintegrated from the inside out. You will see how military defeats, economic failure, nationalism, and a catastrophic world war combined to bring down a structure that had survived for over 6 centuries. And the most counterintuitive part of this story is not what destroyed the empire from the outside, it is what destroyed it from within, long before any external enemy delivered the final blow. The Ottoman Empire was founded around 1299 by Osman I, a tribal leader in northwestern Anatolia. What began as a small Turkic principality gradually expanded through military conquest, strategic marriages, and administrative brilliance. By 1453, Sultan Mehmed II captured Constantinople, ending the Byzantine Empire and making the Ottomans the dominant power in the eastern Mediterranean. By the 16th century under Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire stretched from Hungary in the west to Persia in the east, and from the Crimea in the north to Yemen in the south. This was not a primitive frontier state. This was a sophisticated, multilingual, multireligious superpower with complex legal systems, a professional military, and a bureaucracy that governed dozens of distinct ethnic and religious communities under one roof. But here is what nobody talks about when they discuss the Ottoman Golden Age. The very systems that made the empire great in the 16th century became liabilities in the 18th. The Devshirme system, which recruited talented boys from Christian families to serve as elite soldiers and administrators, began to break down. The Janissaries, once the most feared infantry in the world, became a political faction more interested in protecting their own privileges than fighting wars. By the late 17th century, Janissary units were passing their positions down to their sons, turning what had been a meritocracy into an entrenched hereditary class. Military effectiveness collapsed. And when military effectiveness collapses in an empire built on military power, everything else begins to follow. The first major external shock came in 1683 at the Battle of Vienna. An Ottoman force of roughly 140,000 men besieged the Habsburg capital. A combined European relief army, including Polish cavalry under King Jan Sobieski, broke the siege and then pursued the Ottomans back through Hungary. This was not just a military defeat. It was the moment when the psychological balance of power shifted. For the next 2 centuries, the Ottomans would be on the defensive. Territory that had taken generations to conquer began bleeding away piece by piece. The Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699 was the clearest early signal of structural decline. The Ottomans surrendered Hungary to Austria, Podolia to Poland, and Azov to Russia. For the first time, the empire formally ceded major territories through a negotiated peace rather than reconquering them. This set a pattern that would repeat itself with increasing severity over the next 200 years. By the 19th century, European powers had given the Ottoman Empire a name that said everything about how they perceived it: the sick man of Europe. This phrase, reportedly used by Tsar Nicholas I of Russia in 1853, captured a brutal reality. The empire's economy was falling behind. Industrial output in Europe was transforming warfare, agriculture, and trade. The Ottomans had no comparable industrial base. By 1875, the empire was forced to declare partial bankruptcy on its foreign debts. By 1881, European creditors had established the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, an organization that directly collected Ottoman tax revenues to repay foreign loans. The empire had effectively lost financial sovereignty. But here is the more complicated truth that gets overlooked. The Ottoman leadership knew the empire was in trouble, and they tried to fix it. The Tanzimat reforms of 1839 to 1876 were a genuine and serious attempt at modernization. These reforms introduced equality before the law regardless of religion, reorganized the military along European lines, restructured taxation, and established new educational institutions. Sultan Mahmud II had already abolished the Janissaries in 1826 in what became known as the Auspicious Incident, replacing them with a modern European-style army. These were not token gestures. They were sweeping changes that reshaped Ottoman society. The problem was timing. The reforms came too late and moved too slowly against the forces already pulling the empire apart. Nationalism was the most devastating of those forces. The 19th century saw nationalist movements erupt across Ottoman territory. Greece gained independence in 1830 after a brutal war of independence supported by Britain, France, and Russia. Serbia achieved autonomy, then full independence. Bulgaria, Romania, and Montenegro followed. Each successful independence movement encouraged the next. The empire was not just losing battles. It was losing its basic legitimacy as a governing structure in the eyes of its own populations. Dozens of ethnic and religious communities that had coexisted, sometimes uneasily, for centuries were now being told by the new ideology of nationalism that their primary loyalty should be to their own people, not to the Sultan in Constantinople. The Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878 delivered another devastating blow. Russia defeated Ottoman forces decisively, and the resulting Treaty of Berlin in 1878 stripped the empire of large portions of the Balkans. Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro became fully independent states. Bulgaria became autonomous. Bosnia and Herzegovina passed to Austrian administration. In less than a year, the Ottomans lost roughly one-third of their remaining European territory and one-fifth of their total population. By 1908, a group of young military officers and intellectuals known as the Committee of Union and Progress, more commonly called the Young Turks, had seized effective control of the government through a revolution. They believed that by centralizing power and modernizing aggressively, they could save the empire. Instead, their policies accelerated its disintegration. Their emphasis on Turkish ethnic identity alienated Arab, Armenian, and other non-Turkish populations. The empire lost Libya to Italy in 1911. The Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913 cost the Ottomans almost all of their remaining European territory. By 1913, the empire had been pushed back nearly to the borders of modern Turkey. Then came the decision that sealed the empire's fate. In October 1914, the Young Turk leadership brought the Ottoman Empire into the First World War on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary. The motivations were a combination of ideological alignment, fear of British and Russian power, and a desperate hope that a German victory might reverse Ottoman territorial losses. That gamble failed completely. By the war's end in 1918, Ottoman armies had been defeated on multiple fronts. British forces had taken Palestine, Mesopotamia, and much of the Arab world. The empire had lost nearly a quarter of its Anatolian population to war, disease, famine, and the genocide of the Armenian people, which killed an estimated 600,000 to 1.5 million Armenians between 1915 and 1923. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 attempted to formally dismember the empire, dividing Anatolia itself between Greek, Armenian, French, and Italian spheres. But a Turkish nationalist movement led by Mustafa Kemal, later known as Ataturk, refused to accept these terms. The Turkish War of Independence from 1919 to 1923 drove Greek forces from Anatolia and established a new, purely Turkish national state. On November 1, 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate was formally abolished. On October 29, 1923, the Republic of Turkey was declared. 623 years of continuous Ottoman rule ended not with a single dramatic battle but with a legal announcement. The Ottoman collapse teaches several lessons that remain relevant today. Empires built on military dominance must continually adapt that military to changing conditions or face irreversible decline. Economic sovereignty matters as much as territorial sovereignty. Ethnic and religious diversity can be managed through inclusive governance, but once nationalist ideology takes hold, the centrifugal forces become nearly impossible to contain. An external military pressure, no matter how severe, rarely destroys a state on its own. Before you go, if you learned something valuable today, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to War History for a brand new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.